Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Football Corner. This is your host, Joaquim, and I will be covering every single match day of the 2026 World Cup and more. Of course, there will be a bit of bias since I'm Brazilian, as you can see, and a Cruzeiro fan, but I'll try to keep it as impartial as possible. Today, we'll be talking about one of the hardest topics going into the 2026 World Cup, Brazil's call-ups. We'll start with the goalkeepers. Before we start talking about the goalkeepers, I want to mention how Carlo Ancelotti, Brazil's head coach, called up 3 goalkeepers, 9 defenders, only 5 midfielders, and 9 attackers. Instead, I would reduce the number of defenders and attackers to 8 so I could call up 7 midfielders, of course keeping the 3 goalkeepers as well. This is because the stability in the midfield is so important so the midfield doesn't get too tired and overran by the other team. If this happens and the midfield does get overran and tired, it can lead to us losing the game, since being dominated in the midfield is a big step in the wrong way. In the end, it's important to have a balance, not just several defenders and several attackers and just a little bit of midfielders. For the goalkeepers, Carlo Ancelotti, otherwise known as Mr., Professor, or even Carleto, called up Alisson, Ederson, and Weverton. I agree with only Weverton being called up. This is because Weverton is in great form right now, shown by his fantastic save from Everton Ribeiro's close-range header in the game against Bahia last week, and because of his past heroics for the national team, with his penalty save helping us win our first ever Olympic gold. However, I disagree with Alisson and Ederson being called up because of Alisson's recent injuries and Ederson's poor form this season. In Alisson's case, he has had 2 or 3 injuries that season that have ruled him out for several of Liverpool's games. I want a goalkeeper at the World Cup who will be able to start every single game for 90 minutes. I'm not so sure Alisson can do that, and I want a goalkeeper who will certainly play the whole 90 and also be able to move freely whenever he wants. I fear that Alisson may have a little bit of movement restriction because it's never easy coming off several injuries, so I want to stay on the safe side and call up someone else. In Ederson's case, I think his form just isn't good enough. A big aspect of players who are called up is that they're in good form. If they're in bad form or if they have low confidence like Ederson has currently, they might not play as well for the national team. Some Fenerbahce fans even want Ederson out of Turkey after only being there since the beginning of the season. That is why I propose to you Fábio from Fluminense and Everson from Atlético Mineiro. On one hand, you have Fábio, a very experienced goalkeeper, 45 years old, and has the most games played by a player in the whole world of all time with over 1,000. He also can still make some extraordinary saves and is very clutch in penalty shootouts. On the other hand, Everson is also a monster in penalty shootouts. He not only saves so many penalties, but he scores them as well. He has been a big reason of why Atlético Mineiro wins so many of their penalty shootouts. That's it for the goalkeepers. In the defense, let's start with the left backs. Carlo Ancelotti called up Alexandro from Flamengo and Douglas Santos from Zenit St. Petersburg. I do like Douglas Santos a little bit, but I think both he and Alexandro shouldn't have been called up. This is because Alexandro has been aging and his pace and physicality have declined. One of my friends who is a Flamenguista, a Flamengo fan, even said Alexandro is struggling to play the whole game. His endurance isn't the same as it was anymore. I want players who are fully fit and who can play the full 90 minutes for the national team. In Douglas Santos' case, I think he's a good player, but there are better options to be called up. The 2 players who I think should be called up at left back are Kaique Bruno from Cruzeiro and Luciano Juba from Bahia. On one hand, you have probably the best defensive fullback in South America in Kaique Bruno. Kaique Bruno can stop attackers at any level. He has stopped some of the best in the world, such as Estevão when he was still playing for Palmeiras. Unfortunately, Estevão did get injured and won't be able to be called up, but he was one of my favorite players, and I hope he still plays very well in the 2030 World Cup. Moving on to Luciano Juba, he's one of the best attacking fullbacks in South America. Juba has been involved in over 40% of Bahia's goals in the Brasileirão this season. The Brasileirão is the Brazilian league, for those of you who don't know. Luciano Juba will provide balance to Kaique, because if we need a change to make the game more attacking, we can put on Juba. If we need to make a change for the game to be more defensive, we can put on Kaique Bruno. That's it for the left backs. Now we'll shift our focus to the center backs. Carlo Ancelotti called up 5 center backs. Those are Gabriel Magalhães from Arsenal, who I think is the best defender in the world, Léo Pereira from Flamengo, Marquinhos from PSG, Bremer from Juventus, and Danilo from Flamengo. I do agree with calling up Gabriel, since in my view he's the best defender in the world, Marquinhos from PSG for all the trophies that he's won and all the experience that he'll bring, and Bremer because he's played so well in the recent friendlies that we've had against France, the game where he scored and made several defensive contributions. But I disagree with calling up Léo Pereira and Danilo. Similarly to Alexandro, Danilo doesn't seem to quite have the same physicality and pace as he used to have, because he's now 35, which is much older than center backs like Murilo, who could have been called up. Danilo has been good for us in the past, but I just don't think he has the quality to be this good for us anymore. On the other hand, Léo Pereira is a great player, in my opinion, a player of quality who does have the talent to be in the seleção, but I do think there's a better option than him. That is Murilo from Nottingham Forest. Murilo has shown to be such a bright talent in one of the hardest leagues in the world. His defensive positioning, his really big physical presence, and his goal line clearances that can change games have proved to be really important for Nottingham Forest. He'll bring the same things to the seleção, and his defensive qualities I think are a little more important than Léo Pereira's very good ball distribution. In center backs, we should be looking for the better defender, not necessarily the better passer. That's it for the center backs. The right backs are up next. Carlo Ancelotti called up 2 right backs, Ibanez and Wesley. Honestly, I have no complaints at all here. Wesley is a great fullback who plays at Roma, and he's very good attacking wise, similarly to Juba. But I think Ibanez is the perfect contrast to him, whether he comes off the bench or starts, because he's one of the best defensive fullbacks that we have. Like I had mentioned before, it is important to have this balance so we can adapt and change to the conditions of the game that we're playing in. That's it for the defenders. Next, we'll talk about the midfielders. Before we start talking about the midfielders that Carleto called up, I want to clarify something. I mentioned how Danilo from Flamengo wasn't a player that I wanted to call up in the defense, but I didn't mention a replacement. This is because I would bring an extra midfielder instead of him. Now we can start dissecting the midfield. Carlo Ancelotti, surprisingly, only called up 5 midfielders. He called up Casemiro, Bruno Guimarães, Danilo Santos, the one from Botafogo, Fabinho, and Lucas Paquetá. I do agree with calling up the first three, Danilo Santos, Casemiro, and Bruno Guimarães, because of Casemiro's big defensive presence and his historic efforts for the national team. Bruno Guimarães because he's one of the best midfielders in the world, and Danilo Santos because he loves playing well for us, similarly to Luis Henrique in the attack. But I disagree with calling up Paquetá and Fabinho. This is because I feel like there are better options. Instead of Paquetá, I would call up Matheus Pereira. Matheus Pereira for Cruzeiro has been our talisman. Even though we have Caio Jorge, who is a fantastic attacker, it's Matheus Pereira who has been our best player, always orchestrating fantastic attacking plays and giving many assists. There's even a very impressive stat about Matheus Pereira. He is a player in the whole world with the most created chances in the year of 2026. Not only is he better than Paquetá stats-wise, but also by the eye test. If you watch Matheus Pereira play, it's so satisfying. It looks like he's gliding across the pitch. His movements are so smooth and efficient. Moving on to Fabinho, I don't believe he should be called up because André Santos is a far better option. André is younger and has a better attacking repertoire than Fabinho. Although his defense might not be as high of a level as Fabinho, his attacking qualities are much better than Fabinho's, as shown by the assists that he got in some of Chelsea's the assists that he has gotten in some of Chelsea's games, and also the occasional goals that he has scored. Andre is also a powerhouse in the midfield. He's always running the whole game and he can still make intelligent decisions with his passes. As I mentioned earlier, I would have brought an extra midfield player instead of Danilo from Flamengo. That player is Gerson from Cruzeiro. This is because Gerson can do everything. He is the perfect versatile player needed in a deep midfield. In Brazil, he's even nicknamed Coringa, which means Joker. Just like the Joker in a deck of cards, he can do so many different functions and he does them all very well. This is crucial for maintaining a good midfield and also having nice options coming off the bench. Next, we can move on to the most exciting part, the attackers. Finally, the most exciting part of the squad has arrived, the attackers. Carlo Ancelotti called up Vinícius, Rafinha, Igor Thiago, Matheus Cunha, Endrick, Ryan, Luis Henrique, Gabriel Martinelli, and of course, the king himself, or as some say the prince, Neymar. I do have only 2 changes for the attackers, and it's basically one change, because my other change is moving Neymar to the midfield and playing him as more of a 10, so I would list him as an attacking midfielder instead of an attacker. But the true change that I have in the attack is I would rather call up Anthony over Gabriel Martinelli. Although Gabriel Martinelli brings important depth to the left wing position, I think we already have enough depth because Vini and Rafinha are both capable of playing there, and also Matheus Cunha is, so 3 is more than enough. And Anthony for me is a better player than Gabriel Martinelli because he has better finishing and better dribbling. Although Gabriel Martinelli is very fast and can help in counterattacks, I feel like Anthony will bring more for us and would be a better dribbler and someone who could hold up the ball and make some better passes as well. And even though I agree with Neymar being called up, we have to talk about him. I know it's a controversial issue, and at times I even thought about not calling him up, about how it could be better if we didn't call him up. But Neymar is the symbol of Brazil. He's our top scorer for the national team. He has more goals than even Pelé has for us. And he's not only there because of what he does on the pitch, but also because of his leadership. As you can see, all the players love him. João Pedro, Rodrigo, Rafinha, everyone has been talking well about him in the interviews. Everyone wanted him to be called up in the national team. Of course, there were some fans who didn't want him, but the people who are most important are the players and the coach, and they definitely wanted him. And Neymar, again, his leadership is a side benefit because what he can do on the pitch sometimes is just magical.
Even if he doesn't play the whole game, he can still have some fantastic moments that will change the course of the game. Like if we need him in the last 10 minutes, he can still produce moments that can completely change the result. Maybe a great pass or a different dribble that can distract the defender and open up an opportunity for one of our uh, talented attackers to score. So that's it for the attackers. That's it for the episode. This has been probably the most watched call-up out of any team, out of any sport ever. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you stay tuned for more. I made this video with a lot of hard work and passion for football, or as in the US they call it soccer, so it would be very nice if you could hit the like and subscribe buttons. Ciao!